Well, through the first 2 weeks of the 2013 NFL season, there has been no shortage of excitement. We've had 22 games decided by 7 points or fewer. That's the most in NFL history through the first 2 weeks of any season. So we waited patiently through that long, torturous 6.5-month off season for the NFL to return. But now that it's back, it was worth the wait, wasn't it? Because we're getting some great games. Got some great games on tap for this week 3. I'd like to talk about a few of them now quickly. Now, I'll be going through all these games in detail here on BETDAQ NFL throughout the week, so we hope you check back. But like I said, I'd like to talk about a few quickly now. A few caught my eye, starting with maybe the most intriguing game of the week, the Thursday night game. The Kansas City Chiefs going on the road to face the Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia installed as a 3-point favorite on BETDAQ, 50 the total in this game. Now, the major storyline here is Andy Reid's return to Philadelphia. Reid, of course, was the Eagles coach for 14 years before he was fired following last season. Now, the Eagles were always good under Reid, but they got suddenly bad and were 4-12 last year, so it ended badly, as those things always seem to, but Reid was unemployed for all of about 5 minutes before landing on his feet in Kansas City. Even though the Chiefs were 2-14 last year, Reid seems to have himself a pretty good team. Chiefs are 2-0. Now, we don't know a whole lot about them. Stomped Jacksonville in week 1 on the road, 28-2, but the Jags could be historically bad, so we don't know yet how good of a win that was. A 1-point home win over Dallas last week impressed me, but again, the Cowboys are a team that has been right on 500 for the last couple of years, haven't been a playoff team. However, if we fast forward to the clock 2 or 3 months and someone told you that Dallas was leading the NFC East, I don't think it would surprise you one bit. So the Cowboys, a legitimate team with a really good offense. The Kansas City Chiefs really held in check. Dallas held only 16 points last week. The Chiefs are facing another good offense on Thursday night. Chip Kelly's Philadelphia Eagles offense. Now, after week 1, everybody was talking about this Eagles offense, and with good reason. I mean, if you watched their first half performance of week 1 against the Washington Redskins, if you were anything like me, your jaw was just hit the floor the entire time. They seemed to be gaining 10 or 15 yards of play at one point. I know they ran, I believe, 52 plays, 330, 340-something yards of total offense in the first half. It was spectacular. Looked just like one of Chip Kelly's Oregon teams running through some helpless Pac-12 team like Washington State. However, they slowed things down in the second half, and then last week, they were still good in a loss to San Diego, but they were more realistic good. And we saw the Washington defense go on the road against the Green Bay Packers, and the Packers hung 580 yards of total offense on them. So now it's starting to look like that maybe that week 1 performance was more all about Washington having a terrible defense than the Eagles having a great offense. However, the Eagles appear to have a really good offense, and they do have an exciting offense. It'll be interesting to see how the Kansas City Chiefs defense handles this offense. Another interesting thing in this game will be the familiarity aspect. Reid knows a whole lot of players on this roster. Now, the schemes the players are in are all different, which Chip Kelly talked about yesterday. And it's the same players, but the players are being asked to do different things. So, not sure how much that familiarity is going to help Reid, though I'm sure there will be some advantages to it. But there'll also be some advantages for the Eagles' defense going up against an offensive scheme that they practiced against for years and years. Many players on this Eagles defense played for years under Andy Reid. And again, it's not like Reid, he didn't reinvent the wheel when he went to Kansas City. Offense is his thing, and he brought that same scheme, that same system, his offensive philosophy with him to Kansas City. So I'm sure Reid is going to be cognizant of this and is going to change some things up on Thursday so the Eagles players won't know the audibles and things of that nature. But no doubt there are going to be some tendencies that players like Trent Cole, for example, will probably be able to pick up on having practiced against this offense every day for so long. So for that reason alone, maybe the under 50 here might be something to look at. I know betting the under in Philadelphia games is not going to be very popular this year. They were involved in another shootout last week in their loss to Kansas City. The Eagles appear to have a bad defense. Now, we thought coming into the season they're going to have a bad defense. They played really well for half the game against Washington. But again, in hindsight, that might be a case of the Redskins being so bad, Robert Griffin III being so rusty, because the Eagles' defense last week against the Chargers looked just like we expected them to look heading into the season. Phillip Rivers throwing for 400-plus yards. So, very interested to see this game. Chiefs at Eagles going to tell us a whole lot about both teams. One of the most anticipated games of the weekend, kicking off the week on Thursday night. Another game It's going to be very interesting because both these teams, quality teams. I think the Kansas City-Philadelphia game, it's one of those games we don't know if those teams are quality teams yet. They could be. Well, of course, they both could be bad teams. So it's still interesting. But the Green Bay-Cincinnati game, Green Bay at Cincinnati, Packers a 1-point favorite on BETDAQ, 48 the total. That's a game I think we know both these teams are good teams. Both these teams, of course, playoff teams from a year ago. Both these teams made the playoffs for the last couple of years. Cincinnati made the playoffs for 2 years in a row for the first time in over 20 years. Of course, still trying to win a playoff game. Green Bay Packers obviously been fixtures in the playoffs under Mike McCarthy and won a Super Bowl a few years back. Now, Green Bay coming off a great performance against the Washington Redskins last week. They look like the old Packers. Now I'm talking about the Packers circa 2009, 2010, or is that 2010, 2011? Not last year's Packers, that's what I mean. Not saying the Packers were bad last year. They won their division, but you look at their offensive numbers, and they weren't that explosive, incredible offense that they were in 2010 and 2011, for example. They did look like that offense last week against the Washington Redskins. But again, I repeat the last part of that. Against the Washington Redskins. Just talked about it a few minutes ago. The Redskins defense might be really, really bad. They certainly looked really bad against Philadelphia for half the game. They were shredded last week against Green Bay. The Cincinnati Bengals defense, one of the best in the NFL. Excellent in the front seven. Good in the secondary. Maybe not quite as good in the secondary, but still a very good secondary. They'll be put to the test against this Packers offense. But to me, this will tell us more about the Packers than it will the Bengals. I feel like we know what the Bengals are. The Bengals are a team with a really, really good defense and an average offense. This offense has been average. It was actually below average last year statistically in every major offensive statistical category. And so I don't think it's going to magically overnight turn into this great explosive offense. Even though they got some good personnel, A.J. Green, one of the best 5 wide receivers in the league, a couple of good running backs, a really good young running back, a really good-looking young running back anyway, and Giovanni Bernard, BenJarvus Green-Ellis, a reliable running back, Andy Dalton, a young quarterback who has shown some promise, Jay Gruden, still the coordinator there. So all the pieces are the same. We've seen the Cincinnati offense time and again over the last couple of years. Don't expect them to overnight turn into a great offense. So the Bengals are what they are. They're a team with a really good, possibly great defense and a solidly average offense. Green Bay, a team with a great offense and a pretty bad defense. I know that defense played fairly well last week against Washington, but that Week 1 performance against San Francisco 49ers is still fresh in my mind. And Colin Kaepernick, Colin Kaepernick's a great player. He's not one of the best 5 or 6 pocket passers in the NFL. He looked that way against the Green Bay Packers in Week 1. So this game's going to tell us a lot about Green Bay. If this team is the 2010 Green Bay Packers, 2011 Green Bay Packers, with the offense that averages 35 points a game, I think they go in there and beat Cincinnati. I just don't think Cincinnati has enough offense to keep up with them. However, if this is last season's Green Bay Packers, a good team with a good offense, but, an offense that is just good, not great, which they were last season. You look at the stats, Green Bay's defense actually ranked higher in the total defense category than the offense did in total offense throughout the entire season. I believe that changed in week 16 or 17 when Green Bay exploded for a 50-point game against Tennessee, I believe it was. Anyway, getting a little off subject now, but I feel like Sunday's Green Bay-Cincinnati game is going to tell us a whole lot about the Green Bay Packers. I have a feeling the public's going to like Green Bay in this game. A little too early to tell, but I just get that feeling. People like betting on offense. Green Bay is a team that when they're clicking, when they're in rhythm, they can be as impressive as any team in the league. So it'll be interesting to see what this line does over the course of the week, if BETDAQ puts up any more markets and where the public is taking this game. But Green Bay at Cincinnati, one of the better games of the weekend. Another game that's interesting, not because these are two great teams, but because these are two teams that have been talked a lot about over the last couple of weeks. A lot of turmoil involving both these teams. That is Tampa Bay on the road facing the New England Patriots. New England a 7-point favorite on BETDAQ, 44.5 the total in this game. Now the Bucs, they're just a hard luck team. Those two losses, their first two losses, a 1-point loss to the New York Jets and a 2-point loss last week to New Orleans. Those are as painful a losses as you're going to see. The Jets lost. They wouldn't have lost that game without a penalty, an uncalled for late hit that extended the Jets' eventual game-winning, the drive that ended up winning the game for the Jets. And then last week, had a field goal attempt from 40-some-odd yards, would have given them a 4-point lead. Greg Schiano considered whether or not to kick the field goal or just punt. He thought about it, hesitated a little bit, just over a minute left, didn't want to give New Orleans the ball on the 30-some-odd yard line. Of course, you get the ball, the spot where the field goal is missed, the spot where the holder places the ball down if the field goal is missed. So Schiano didn't want to give that New Orleans offense good field position, needing only a field goal to beat him. So I'm sure he thought about a pooch punt, try to pin him down deep. But then I'm sure he couldn't turn away from the thought that, hey, if we can make this field goal, which an NFL kicker should make, we have a 4-point lead. New Orleans needs to score a touchdown. We know what happened. The Bucs did not make that field goal. 3 plays later, Drew Brees had moved the Saints right down the field. Saints kicked a chip shot game-winning field goal. And that's not all the bad news in Tampa. We're getting all kinds of anonymous reports now about discontent with the way Greg Schiano is doing things, saying he's running too tight a ship, etc., etc. The type of things you expect to hear when a team is struggling like the Bucs. Bucs have lost 7 out of their last 8, stretching back to last season. So things started out on such a high note throughout the first 11 or 12 weeks, 10 or 11 weeks, I guess, of last year under Greg Schiano, the first 10 or 11 weeks of the Greg Schiano regime. But they're unraveling in Tampa, yet the Bucs are only a 7-point road underdog against the New England Patriots. That speaks volumes about what people think about this Patriots offense right now. And hey, I mean, that means the people have been watching. You saw their performance last week against the Jets. You saw their performance in Week 1 against Buffalo. New England just can't get anything going on offense because the cupboard is bare. Tom Brady is just surrounded by next to nothing right now. And it was obvious last week. You watched his frustration, his body language. I mean, Brady, their receivers running around out there right now, Aaron Dobson, Kenbrell Tompkins, Josh Boyce, who really don't know what's going on. They don't know what to do. They're not guys that Brady trusts in the heat of the moment. That was clear last week. Julian Edelman seemed to be the only healthy guy last week that Brady really trusted. Now, we're hearing that Rob Gronkowski could play this week, but he's still more doubtful than questionable, apparently. So the cast of characters should be pretty much the same. Should be a heavy dose of Julian Edelman mixed in with some Kenbrell Tompkins, Aaron Dobson, what have you. So will New England's offense be able to get anything going? You know, say what you will about the Bucs. They've been playing good defense. To hold that New Orleans offense to 16 points last week, that's very impressive. So the Bucs have made strides on that side of the ball after finishing 32nd, dead last in the NFL in pass defense a year ago. We knew they were going to make strides because they signed Deshaun Goldson, the all-pro safety from the San Francisco 49ers, and of course cornerback Darrelle Revis, formerly the New York Jets. But Goldson could be suspended for this game for another hit to the head last week. He's appealing. We'll know tomorrow, I believe. They're saying we'll know tomorrow, which would be Wednesday. So you want to keep an eye on that. New England, how good is New England, or rather, how bad is New England? We know this isn't the New England team of 2007 or even last year, but is this a team that's going to win the AFC East? I think we need to ask now, because the Miami Dolphins, they're coming. They're a good young team, coming on strong. And New England, even though they won their first 2 games, they've played Buffalo and the New York Jets, 2 teams who are expected to be very bad heading into this season. And I don't know about you. I know each of those teams has won a game, but I'm not convinced that either Buffalo or the Jets is very good at all. So if New England loses this game, I think it tells us all we need to know, because they've messed around and almost lost a couple of games to a couple of teams that are considered bad teams already. And the Bucs, I think, fit that mold right now, a team that's considered a bad team. I know they almost beat New Orleans last week, but I don't know. Most people, I think, expect the Bucs to lose this game in New England. And to me, 7 strikes me as a little low. That strikes me as sort of a low line, baiting people to bet on New England. But we'll see about that. Maybe that's just my perspective. Maybe I have a lower opinion of the Tampa Bay Bucs than most people. Just talked about the Miami Dolphins as a team that might give New England a run for their money in the AFC East this year. The Dolphins host the Atlanta Falcons on Sunday. The Dolphins are a 1-point favorite on BETDAQ, 44 the total in this game. Atlanta, their offense is the walking wounded right now too. Not as to the extent of New England's, but Steven Jackson not going to play in this game. Roddy White still nursing that high ankle sprain. Now, I heard throughout last week that Julio Jones was questionable with a knee injury. I watched that game last week against St. Louis. If that's Julio Jones at questionable, I'd like to see him at 100%. Julio Jones was awesome in that game, so I don't count on him being all injured, but no doubt Roddy White has not been himself this season since spraining that ankle. And again, no Steven Jackson in the backfield, so a short-handed Atlanta offense going on the road to face a really good young Miami defense. And I'm impressed with Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill has really made some strides this season. People talk about the crop of rookie quarterbacks last year, and the first three names off of everybody's tongue: Andrew Luck, RG3, Russell Wilson. I'm telling you, I'm not convinced that in 5 years we're not going to look back and see that Ryan Tannehill is better than at least one of those guys. And I got to say, I have an early lean towards the Dolphins on Sunday. Now, I'm a little careful here because I went against Atlanta last week. I had a feeling St. Louis might sneak in there and keep that game close, and Atlanta burned me. St. Louis almost came back in that game. Atlanta has blown a lot of big leads over their last 8 or 10 games, but they hung on last week, ended up covering by a point. So obviously you're a little bit gun-shy to go against a team 2 straight weeks, and I do have respect for the Atlanta Falcons. But I think the Dolphins, after seeing the Dolphins for the first 2 weeks, I think this is a playoff team, a team that's really going to challenge New England in the AFC East. And at home against an injured Falcons team, I think this might be a spot to act. Like I said, we'll look more at it over the course of the week here on BETDAQ NFL. My early lean is towards Miami in that situation. Last game I want to mention here quickly is the line that has generated the most discussion over the last couple of days or over the last 36 hours or so since the lines have been released. And that's just because of the enormity of it. That is the Seattle Seahawks at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Seattle, a 19.5-point favorite on BETDAQ. 40.5 the total in this game. So pretty much says it all about Jacksonville's offense when you have a total as low as 40.5, yet the line is 19.5. And you know what? As bad as you think Jacksonville's offense might be, let me tell you, they're worse. They are worse. Through 2 games, let me give you the breakdown of what Jacksonville has done offensively. The first game against the Kansas City Chiefs, a team that was 2-14 in 2012. The Jags waited until the middle of the fourth quarter to cross the 36-yard line, their own 36-yard line. You might have heard me say this, so I won't belabor the point again because I just cannot believe this. So over the last week, I've repeated this several times. It took Jacksonville until the middle of the fourth quarter to get within 13 yards of the 50, to get past their own 36-yard line, to even approach the 50-yard line. That is utter futility. And then last week they played the Oakland Raiders, maybe the only team in the NFL projected to be as bad as them heading into the year, with a defense returning only 2 starters heading into the season, 9 new starters for that Oakland defense, and the Jags at one point went over 36 minutes of game time without a first down. So they go on the road this week to face a Seahawks defense that is among the best in the NFL. I mean, this is one of those games I honestly believe it's a legitimate question. We should get BETDAQ to offer the bet. Who will score more points in this game? Seattle's defense or Jacksonville's offense? I'm telling you, it's a toss-up. It's a toss-up type situation. Jacksonville's offense unable to generate a single point against Kansas City. Their only points came via a safety. And last week against Oakland, they scored a garbage time touchdown when the result was already decided. I don't know. Are the Jags offense, can they possibly score more than 3, 7 in this game? I know when I say can they possibly, sure, anything can happen in the NFL. Seattle could turn the ball over and give the Jags a short field or what have you. But 19.5, this line. Out in Las Vegas, the number opened at 16.5. It's now 20 most places in Vegas. Again, 19.5 at BETDAQ. Interesting little tidbit for you. Since 1985, there have been 9 games in the NFL with lines of 20 points or bigger. The favorites in those games, 1-8 against the spread. So nearly always, no matter how good one team is, no matter how bad the other team is, when the line is this big, when you're talking about a 20-point situation, nearly always the smart move to take the points. And in this case, Jacksonville's head coach, Gus Bradley, of course, he was Seattle's defensive coordinator for the last 4 years. So this guy knows the Seahawks personnel intimately. This guy knows schemes, coaching philosophies. This is not like Andy Reid going back to play Philadelphia, where some of the players are the same, but the schemes and what they're doing is totally different. They're still doing all the same things in Seattle they were doing last year when Gus Bradley was part of the coaching staff. So there's got to be something that Bradley can take out of that and apply to the game plan that's going to help out the Jags here this week. So, I mean, if you're going to bet against a team that is a 20-point underdog whose coach was the defensive coordinator of the other team last year, that pretty much says it all about your opinion of said team, in this case Jacksonville. And you know what? As sad as it is, in this case, I'm not sure Seattle is not going to end up being the winning side here. Now, listen, I don't think I'm going to be laying 20 points in any NFL game. I've kicked myself enough back in double-digit favorites when they're 10 or 11-point favorites and failed to cover. 19.5 in this case on BETDAQ is just absolutely obscene. But I'm telling you this: if I was going to back the Jags, I would not watch the game. Just don't watch the game, because if you're going to back the Jags, your best chance is, Seattle's up 27-3, middle of the fourth quarter. They've got their reserves in on defense. Jacksonville scores a late touchdown. That's the best chance of a cover here. But something like that could happen, no doubt about it. We'll see. A cartoonish spread, no doubt about it. The Jacksonville Jaguars, I know we're only in week 3. I'll say it now. They might not win a game this season. Only happened once in NFL history. Detroit Lions a few years ago. It could be twice. This is the worst team in the history of the Jacksonville Jaguars franchise, including their expansion year. And I have a feeling we might see another ugly, ugly performance on the road in Seattle on Sunday. Anyway, those are 5 games. There's plenty more, obviously. Full slate of games this week. As I said, we'll be getting to all of them here in detail on BETDAQ NFL. So we do hope you check back throughout the course of the week. Until then, for BETDAQ NFL, I'm John Arnette.